Okay. Welcome, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us for this nonprofit fund info session. My name is Jen Mayo. I'm the Director of Strategic Giving here at ECCF. So my role is to work, did I turn off my video? There we go. My role is to work with donors and nonprofits to help them access the variety of funds that we offer here at ECCF. So today we're going to spend time talking about nonprofit funds, and let me just bring up the presentation. And so I will spend some time running through the presentation, but I invite any questions along the way, and then we'll certainly have time for questions after I run through this very quick presentation. Sorry, I'm just admitting people as they pop in. So to get started, just so everybody is aware, I know that there are a number of different organizations on this call. We're really happy that you're here. We're happy that you're curious about what nonprofit funds are at ECCF. They are really, we know that as you're building and growing your organization, that investment management is something that can take up a lot of mind share and a lot of capacity. And at ECCF, we realized, hey, we're managing all of these charitable investment funds in these investment portfolios and in these investment pools. And wouldn't it be great that if we could invite our nonprofit partners in the community to access those pools as well? We know that, for whatever reason, you are looking for investment management services, whether it's for, rainy day funds, whether it's for building an endowment, whether it's for a capital campaign. And we are already managing and have access to 2 different investment portfolios that I'll walk through today that we can offer as a nonprofit fund. So that's really the synopsis of what we'll be talking about in the presentation today. So I'll go through in high level what nonprofit funds are, how they work, a little bit of detail about the investment portfolios that our investment committee manages, and then I'll leave time for questions. So just to kick off, I think it's helpful to set the stage and remind everybody, who ECCF is and what we do in the community. So we are the Essex County Community Foundation. We work in the 34 cities and towns in Essex County. And our mission is to inspire philanthropy that strengthens those communities. We do that in 3 main ways. So we do that by managing and investing charitable funds. We have over 325 funds in the family, almost 140 million of assets and solely charitable assets under management. And the types of charitable funds that we manage, about half of those 325 funds are donor advised funds. So we work with donors in the community to match their kind of giving goals, values, et cetera, with nonprofits doing great work here at home. We also have other types of legacy funds, as well as scholarship funds, and then nonprofit funds, which we'll speak about today. The second thing we do is strengthening and supporting nonprofits. So we provide funding to nonprofits. We have given out, over 1,800 grants in fiscal year 2023, and we provide capacity building to nonprofits. So, as a community foundation, that is one of our key roles in the community, is to help strengthen our nonprofit organizations that exist here. And then the third thing that we do is the community leadership and systems change efforts, where, we really focus on coalition building around very specific issues that are facing our communities. So we have our Creative County Initiative, we have our Digital Equity Initiative, and we've worked with thousands of partners and gotten 40 million of assets deployed in the community to address those very systemic issues facing our residents. So nonprofit funds are really the marriage between 2 of those 3 core competencies of investing charitable assets and strengthening nonprofits. And as I said in the beginning, it kind of comes from this place of, we're already managing charitable assets. We have access to, investment products at a scale because of the money that we have from our donor advised funds or scholarship funds, et cetera. And so we can provide that access to nonprofits through these nonprofit funds, which really we think is a win-win for everyone in the community. So a nonprofit fund, very simply, is a charitable investment fund to support and sustain a nonprofit organization's medium to long-term operations and goals. And so I've already touched on a couple of these things, but the benefits to partnering with us in this way is that nonprofits have access to professionally managed investment portfolios. And this is the key that I talk about a lot when I talk about nonprofit funds, is that they're specifically curated for charitable assets. So we're not a money manager, right? We're not investing, to chase the highest returns out there. Our investment committee is comprising investment portfolios solely for charitable assets with an eye towards preservation of capital and real growth, but maintaining, the fundamental understanding that we want to protect these assets over the long term, but achieve that steady, stable asset growth. Another benefit is that outsourcing investment management and administration can really free up capacity both on your board and your executive level for mission fulfillment. So whether you have capacity, whether your board has a finance committee and investment committee has investment expertise on it already, or if you don't have that currently, we can, by partnering with ECCF in this way, we can remove and create that capacity for you so that your board doesn't have to spend as much time maybe managing its own investment portfolio or looking at the various investment managers, running an RFP process, et cetera. And then we provide partnership beyond investment management. We have an entire nonprofit services team and function that I'll run through towards the end of this presentation. So very simply, how does a nonprofit fund work? So a nonprofit establishes the nonprofit fund with ECCF. Contributions flow from the nonprofit to ECCF, where we put them into our investment portfolios. Now, this is the key. We do not step into the interface with your donor. You continue to accept gifts on your organization's behalf. You steward your donors. And then, as you create as funds build up in your operating reserves, you then send them to us. We then invest them, and then they are invested. Hopefully they grow over time. That's the plan. And then money can only flow back from the nonprofit fund to your organization. So it's a closed circle. The way this works is that it remains an asset on the organization's balance sheet. And it is an asset and a liability on ECCF's balance sheet. So it really is as though you kind of come in alongside us to invest in those investment pools that we are already managing. Okay, so a nonprofit fund can take two different variations. So the first is a reserve fund, which allows utmost flexibility to the nonprofit organization. That is, assets that have built up in your operating reserves that you are looking to, may sit in a savings account or a CD at the moment. And you're looking for a little bit more of growth for those assets. You want them to be accessible to you when or if you need them. We like to think of them as a little bit of a rainy day fund. And so what the reserve fund is, I like to say you can give us money on a Monday and you can request it all back on a Friday. We don't take any expenditure responsibility. We don't take any donor restrictions. It's simply you passing on your funds to ECCF to manage, and then you can request them back at any time. We also offer what we call an endowed fund. It's technically a quasi-endowed fund because we cannot lock up your assets, again, because they sit as an asset on your balance sheet. But that is where a nonprofit organization comes to ECCF and says, I would love you to manage and invest my assets, but I'd also like you to put me on a spending diet. So I really want this money to be tucked away for the long term, and I want a spending policy attached with that. And I just want that money sent to me every year. So it kind of functions like a traditional endowed fund, except for the fact that, it is not 100% under lock and key. It's just that we are putting you on a spending policy. The endowed fund we also tend to work with a lot of organizations that have a donor who come to them and say, I want to set up an endowment for you. The organization may not have the capacity to do that in-house, and the endowed fund can be a great way for the donor to feel comfort that his money is going to be stewarded for the long term through a spending policy, and the organization to be able to accept that sort of gift without having to build out the full infrastructure to manage an endowment. So ECCF, as your investment partner, as I mentioned, we have about 140 million of charitable assets under management already. So we're already doing fund management. We are a mission-aligned investment partner because we are, your community foundation doing good work in these 34 cities and towns in Essex County. And we have the longstanding investment expertise, not only with our 25-year history, but with our investment committee that has, the professionals on our investment committee have almost 100 years combined investment experience. And they are the ones creating the investment portfolios that the nonprofit fund will be invested in. So our investment strategy for the investment portfolios is to target steady asset growth while managing risk and cost. So I always like to say that, we're not chasing alpha. We're not trying to get those outsized returns. We're trying to, steadily grow charitable assets over time with an eye towards protection, but also an eye towards, we want to make sure that, they're earning money. But we want to make sure it's being done in a protective and conservative manner. So, we're seeking to preserve and grow the real purchasing power of those underlying assets. Our investment committee is professionals with, as I mentioned, over 100 years of combined investment experience, and they manage to our board-approved investment policy statement. And one of the real benefits of a pooled investment fund is that your nonprofit organization gets access to leverage economies of scale and portfolio diversification, as well as lower investment fees that may not be available at the size that you're investing in. We are investing over 140 million of assets. So we are getting, those economies of scale. We're getting access to a variety of different investment products that may not be accessible at a smaller investment size. ECCF has two main investment portfolios that they manage, and they are comprised very similarly of 65% equity and 35% debt. The difference between the two is one is the general investment pool, and that is a broad-based, globally balanced investment strategy, mainly comprised of ETFs with a small portion of private equity. You can see that our one-year return in that investment pool is 12.5% versus the benchmark of 10.8%. The ESG investment pool has very similar composition, 65%, 35%. However, it's invested in managers and underlying funds that focus on those ESG principles. And that has a one-year return of 9% versus the same benchmark of 10.8%. When we think about fund management, obviously there is what does the investment portfolio look like, but also what does it allow your organization to achieve in the long term? And one of the major things is, really continuity in the investment program. The nature of how nonprofit organizations board turnover works, right? That, there may be more frequent turnover on the board. You may have people who have investment knowledge, but then they cycle off. You have to transition, who's liaising with the investment manager? Did the new board members agree with the previous investment strategy? Do they want to change it? Do they want to change the investment manager? It just becomes something that as boards turn over, the investment strategy and plans can really get caught up in that turnover. With a nonprofit fund, ECCF is your long-term investment partner. So your board does not have to be focused on what the detailed investment strategy is. It can just review and have access to ECCF as that partner in the community that is also stewarding your either reserve or endowed assets. And then from an administrative perspective, you're outsourcing all of the administrative aspects of having an investment portfolio. So we provide comprehensive monthly investment portfolio results. We can support annual audit requirements and other reporting needs, and you have 24/7 online access to your fund via the donor portal. So we offer these nonprofit funds, and we think that we offer them, not only as a benefit to you to be able to build up the capacity on your board and free up that capacity, but also because we think that we can offer you a benefit in terms of, you're going to have to pay fees to access an investment strategy one way or the other, whether it's to an investment manager, whether it's through an online platform. And at ECCF, we are aware of that. So our management fees, we are trying to keep them as low as possible. They start at 75 basis points for funds under $1 million, and they scale down from there. But we also invite you to think about that they're a reinvestment into the community, because our investment fees fuel our work, our digital equity work, our COVID response work, our creative county work in the community. So, we think that any investment strategy is going to have a cost associated with it, but this is a way that the cost can be a reinvestment back into your community. I mentioned at the beginning that, we offer partnership beyond investment management, and we do have a nonprofit services team. So with a nonprofit fund, you will get access to individualized support from an assigned relationship manager. Your executive director and your entire board will get complimentary registration to the annual Institute for Trustees that we run every year, which is an incredible capacity building workshop that takes place over a series of weeks. And more information will be coming out about that soon. We curate specific expert-led workshops, specifically for our nonprofit partners, to help them utilize and get the most out of a nonprofit fund. The most recent one we led was Unlocking Non-Cash Assets, which featured a financial advisor and an estate planning attorney, really walking through how to speak to your donors about anything other than cash, and how to really unlock the power behind those sorts of assets. And then, we're building out an education platform on, requested topics that our nonprofit partners have asked us about. So for example, a little endowment fundraising 101 or things of that nature. So that's the comprehensive set of services that we are really wrapping around not only our investment platform, but really looking at it as a true partnership. And just a quick note on mission alignment. ECCF acts as a simple conduit to sustainable investment practices because we do have that ESG fund, so that you can really, if you want to be mission aligned with your investment policy as well as what you're offering to the community, the ESG fund is a great way to do that. The fees are an investment back into the nonprofit community in Essex County. And we're a nonprofit doing great work in this community. You're a nonprofit doing great work in this community. So there's the natural mission alignment between your organization and ECCF. So just quickly, I wanted to run through, two quick mini case studies of why organizations partner with us. The first is a small but growing organization that had a donor who wanted to start an endowment. The organization knew that it couldn't pass that opportunity up, but did not have the structure in place in-house. It didn't have the capacity to be able to do that on a quick turnaround. They called ECCF and we set up a nonprofit fund. The organization worked directly with the donor. The organization accepted and stewarded the gift, and it is now invested and managed by ECCF. The donor is thrilled because they're achieving all of their goals, which is supporting a small but growing organization into the future, but not burdening the executive director with the administration of that gift. And the nonprofit is thrilled because they don't have to administer it. They know it's in good hands being invested and managed, but they can also now fundraise off of it. which they already have, and they're already adding to that fund here at ECCF. The second nonprofit is an organization, a kind of a larger organization in our community that had a robust board and finance committee, and they had built up a significant reserve coming out of the pandemic. And that reserve, was kind of just sitting in a bank account or a CD. And a quote from the executive director says, "Our money was not really working as hard as it could for us." So they called us, opened a reserve fund at ECCF, and they really appreciated that the investment strategy and the mission alignment were exactly what they were looking for. And I really love this quote because I mentioned win-wins already, but I'm the biggest fan of win-win-wins. When you can leverage good all around, why wouldn't you? It just made so much sense. So there's a lot of reasons why we get calls, also a capital campaign, but these are just some of the reasons that our partners have called us and opened nonprofit funds with us. So with that, I will end the quick overview of what nonprofit funds are, and we'll open it for Q&A. Feel free to just unmute yourself, raise your hand, or drop a question in the chat. Yes, Dave.
Yes. Do you have a minimum that an organization can invest?
Yeah, that's a great question. So our minimum is 25,000. But as I like to say, we are an organization here in the community, and we can be flexible. And so if you aren't at that level yet, let's at least have a conversation and see how we can help. The question in the chat about accepting stock donations. So this is a great question. I had mentioned in the presentation that we really keep the relationship of stewarding gifts between the nonprofit and their donors. We think that's important from your relationship perspective to make sure that you are the one interfacing with the donor. However, for smaller organizations who may not have the capacity to accept non-cash assets, particularly stock donations, we can step in and accept that gift directly on your behalf, as long as it goes into the nonprofit fund. And we have done that. I should put that as example number 3 on my last slide, because we have absolutely done that in the past, accepted non-cash asset gifts on behalf of a nonprofit directly into their nonprofit fund.
Got a couple questions, if I may ask them. The endowment fund, this is a long-term fund. You're trying to grow an endowment, but are you restricted? I mean, if you suddenly decide you want to take a big chunk of it back, can you do that at any time?
So you can't do that anytime. That's the reserve fund. The reserve fund is complete flexibility. The endowed fund is a quasi-endowed fund. So we do not take your donor restrictions. We are not responsible for managing those restrictions. We will follow what we agree in the nonprofit fund agreement. That being said, if you come to us, your board has passed a resolution that you would like a portion or all of the endowment assets back, they are ultimately your assets. So yes, you can get the balance from them, but if you think you will need those assets in the medium term, I would say that the endowed fund is not right for that structure, and the reserve fund is. But that leads me to another point, and this is getting a little detailed, but we work with some nonprofits that actually have both. They have a reserve fund and an endowed fund. And as the balance builds up in their reserve fund, they will then move funds into the endowment portion. So, you know, I tend to counsel people that unless you have a very strong reason to set up an endowed fund, start with the reserve fund that offers you flexibility, and it can be moved into an endowed fund. So the whole thing can move into an endowed fund, or a portion can be set up in a new endowed fund down the road.
Can you set up you can set up a spending policy with the endowed fund that you want 5% of it back every year or something like that. That you can do, but you can't.
It is not
You
correct.
jump-
It's
you
set
can't
up to
jump
have a
around.
spending policy. It's not set up to return the corpus.
Okay,
But the corpus in special circumstances may be returned. However, that is not the underlying purpose of an endowed fund.
okay. With another nonprofit, we have an account with ECCF and maybe that's a reserve fund. I never thought exactly what it was entitled, but maybe that's a reserve fund because it's invested in long-term assets. Even the reserve fund is in long-term assets.
Correct.
Okay.
They're invested in
Yeah,
those same investment portfolios, which,
The
you know,
Okay,
yeah.
I see what you're talking about now. Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, unfortunately, we have, it's a little tricky when we talk about nonprofit funds because we are talking about two different types of nonprofit funds, which is
Yeah.
endowed and reserved. And then
Right.
we have our two different investment portfolios. However, the type of fund it is, reserve versus endowed, does not differentiate or have any bearing on the investment strategy.
Okay, so these are no load mutual funds. Is that right? Mostly Vanguard or what do we?
Correct. They're mostly our investment portfolios are mostly comprised of ETFs, and our detailed portfolio composition and results are posted on our website every month. So when I send the follow-up information from this call, which will include the recording, a copy of the slides, I will also include links to those detailed monthly reports. And those will show you the underlying assets that comprise those portfolios.
What would the fees on the funds be? The administrative fee is 75 basis points under $1 million, but the fees on the funds might average how many basis points?
Yeah, so the general costs of our investment portfolios, which are netted out of investment returns, so it's not a fee, it's a cost of accessing the market. Those are 50 basis points, around 50 basis points. But you know, that cost has already been netted out of the investment returns that have been provided.
Right. All right, thank you very much.
Any other questions? This might be our most efficient nonprofit fund info session yet. Yeah, go ahead.
You said that the philosophy is growth of the funds. What kind of returns are you averaging over the years?
So I'll pull back up my slide so I can over the 1 year, the past year, the general pool has returned 12.5%.
Okay.
And that's versus the benchmark of 10.8%. And then you'll see when I send out the detailed investment portfolio results, we go back 3 years and 5 years as well. So that information is provided.
Thank you.
I think what's important to, you know, just following up on that question is when you're looking at the investment returns, it's really helpful to compare them to the benchmark. The benchmark is a composition of, you know, the broad-based stock indices. So the S&P, the Russell 2000, Bank of America high yield. So that is what our investment committee is managing to and trying to outperform. So when they're looking at, you know, how are we doing? How's our asset allocation? How's our investment strategy? It's always with an eye towards that, that meeting or exceeding that benchmark. Okay. So if there are no more questions, and I will, as I mentioned, as a follow-up, I will send the copy of the presentation, the copy of the video recording, as well as the detailed investment portfolio returns. I'll include my contact information. I am available to answer questions or meet with any of your organization's board or executive level team to run through this. I do that a lot. Actually, I join a lot of finance committees to talk about our nonprofit funds. So please view me as a resource. Reach out with questions or anytime you want to chat, and I look forward to connecting with you all.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right.